America is a country built on immigration. One of the first major immigration movements to the U.S. occurred during the 1820s up until the Civil War. Many refer to this period of mass immigration into the United States as Old Immigration. Immigrants came to the United States primarily from northern and western European countries such as Ireland, Germany, and England. During this period of Old Immigration, the Irish immigrants were the most populous immigrants in the United States due to the destruction of their potato crop between the years of 1845 and 1852 by potato blight. This crisis became known as the Irish Potato Famine. Many of the Irish immigrants settled in areas like Boston and New York, while German immigrants tended to settle in more Midwestern areas like Ohio and Wisconsin with the hopes of farming. During the period of Old Immigration, many native citizens to the U.S. began to develop a fear or hatred of immigrants, leading to a nativist movement. Differences in culture, languages, religions, and even politics fueled this movement of resentment towards immigrants. Many Protestants in the United States developed a hatred for the Irish because of their Catholic religious beliefs. Many people of the nativist movement resented immigrants for voting against their political party. For example, many Irish and Germans would vote Democratic, and many desperate immigrants would work for much less than an American would, thus leading to resentment from natives because these immigrants were taking their jobs. As a result of the nativist movement, a new political party was formed, the Know Nothing Party. The group, originally called the Supreme Order of the Star-Spangled Banner, had a platform primarily based on banning Catholics from holding political offices and on calling for stricter naturalization and immigration laws. The Know Nothing Party, however, was short-lived and had essentially disbanded during the 1860s, although it did have a rather large, for a third-party following during the 1850s. Following the American Civil War, another surge of immigrants flowed into the U.S. During the 1880s up until around the 1920s, immigrants came to the United States from parts of southern and eastern Europe. This period, now known as New Immigration, included countries such as Poland, Italy, Greece, and Hungary. These immigrants came to America for a few major reasons, including new economic opportunities, religious asylum, mostly for Jews, and a lack of a military draft. Many immigrants came to America with the intention of working until they had enough money to return home and purchase land or other properties. These people were called birds of passage. Other immigrants felt threatened by their country's presence of a draft and moved to the U.S. for safety. As opposed to the Old Immigration movement in which immigrants settled in Midwestern areas for farming, immigrants during the New Immigration movement tended to settle overwhelmingly in urban areas such as New York City and Chicago. This influx of immigrants into urbanized areas meant there were more people to house. As a result, many people lived in dumbbell tenements. These were tall buildings that had a larger population capacity, but as a result were a fire hazard as well as a culprit for the spread of many diseases. Living expenses were relatively low in dumbbell tenements, and the apartments were primarily occupied by immigrants and the lower class. Jacob Riis documented life in these slums in his book, How the Other Half Lives, bringing light to these disgusting conditions and ended up resulting in improving living conditions for the poor. Dumbbell tenements were not the only challenges faced by immigrants during this time period. Many immigrants during the New Immigration movement had trouble assimilating into American society because many were either highly illiterate or spoke a different language entirely. These immigrants were also disliked, not unsimilar to the nativist movement during Old Immigration. These immigrants would work for less money because they were an unskilled labor source, which resulted in increased resentment towards them from American-born workers. Also, a new fear had developed during this time due to the influx of immigration that the Pope would gain political control. With the growing presence of immigrants in America, many were given jobs by political bosses because of their extreme political voting presence. As a result of the fears of the American-born citizens, the American Protective Association formed to limit Catholic political control and increase immigration laws. These viewpoints of the APA parallel those of the earlier Know Nothing Party. Nativist movements were successful in some cases in limiting immigration into the U.S. For example, in 1882, the United States Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, which banned all Chinese immigration into the U.S. after many American-born workers on the West Coast complained about the Chinese taking their jobs. As well as restricting the flow on Chinese immigrants into the U.S., the Chinese Exclusion Act also brought upon harsh racism. Some Chinese were able to sneak into the U.S. using falsified documents that had been created by people called paper sons. As a result of the Exclusion Act, the Chinese community fought back through a series of Supreme Court cases and were able to secure a ruling that all people born in the United States were automatic citizens. Nativist movements used propaganda such as political cartoons in order to create a negative stigma around immigrants. The political cartoon pictured is from the Los Angeles Times on April 14, 1924, as a response to new immigration laws and depicts immigrants as garbage and undesirable. Another obstacle that stood in the way of immigrants was the trip overseas to the U.S. The transatlantic voyage to America left many with disease as a result of the horrible food and intense crowding on board the ships. There were two main entry points into the U.S. for immigrants. These were Ellis Island in New York and Angel Island in the San Francisco Bay. Congress finally responded to the nativist movement during new immigration when they passed the Emergency Quota Act of 1921, which limited immigration based on the census of 1910's recorded population from each specific immigrant country into the U.S. The act allowed only 3% of the number of immigrants from a country into the U.S. This drastically cut down on the American immigration rates. This law favored Southern and Eastern European immigrants because they were the most populous when the census of 1910 was recorded. Then, in 1924, Congress passed the first National Origins Act, which set a 150,000 quota on immigration and decreased the previously set 3% rule to a 2% rule, and followed the census levels recorded in 1890. This resulted in a favoring of immigrants from Northern and Western Europe. Wives and children of citizens were allowed into the U.S. as non-quota immigrants. Congress then passes a new National Origins Act in 1927, which kept the 150,000 immigrant quota but adjusted distribution proportional to the country of birth of American inhabitants in 1920. This new act favored immigrants from Western Europe, and they soon became very populous in the United States. These two surges of immigration have led to different cultures all over our modern-day America. America was once referred to as a melting pot of cultures and ideas, but today America is most commonly referred to as a salad bowl of cultures. The melting pot theory emphasized the assimilation of American and immigrant cultures into one another, while the salad bowl idea is one of peaceful coexistence, but not assimilation. Immigration during the Gilded Age shaped the United States into the country of eclectic cultures that we are today.
Immigration man